everybody. This is Dr. Jessica Friedman at MedEdits Medical Admissions, and it is great to see everybody tonight. We are just going to give people a little bit of time to tune in, and we will then get started. Sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to tune in, so it's now 7 p.m., so we'll wait till about 7:01, 7:02, and then we will start the program. And I also hope that everyone asks a lot of questions tonight. Things are definitely a little bit more exciting when there are questions, so that would be awesome. And I can answer questions about anything related to medical school admissions, residency admissions, fellowship, even college. Certainly, we do work with a lot of pre-medical students who are currently in college, or they're starting college, let's say in the fall, and they know that they want to be pre-med and they know that they want to go to medical school. And then, of course, we work with students when they are sophomores, juniors, or seniors and getting ready to apply. So really, we work with students at all phases of the process. And we also work with students, over several years. So, we might work with them to help them get into medical school, then we help them get into residency, and then we help them get into fellowship. So, something, that we really enjoy is really seeing students grow up and being part of that process and watching their maturation, both in terms of, their emotional maturation, their academic maturation. And it's, it's really nice to see. And we definitely observe, students grow in many different ways. And that's, I say, one of the, biggest perks of the job, so to speak. So if anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And, we're also happy to link you to, the various articles that we have on our website that might answer your questions as well. So just to introduce myself, as more people join us, my name is Dr. Jessica Friedman. I am a physician. I am a former admissions officer at both the medical school and the residency levels. And I used to work at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And I founded MedEdits Medical Admissions after leaving Mount Sinai about, 14 years ago. I lose track, honestly. And I founded MedEdits not really knowing where it would go, how it would go, while working in the community part-time in an emergency department at a community hospital. And MedEdits has continued to grow. And I have brought on, an amazing group of faculty. And finding good faculty is, definitely not easy because we have, high standards here. And so, we require that all of our faculty, have past admissions experience, not just, at the medical student level, but at the faculty level, ideally for our most senior faculty. And that is certainly something that sets us apart, and that allows us to, to give the best guidance. Something that I just wanted to start out with tonight, is a little information about, average MCATs when it comes to medical school admissions. We are certainly finding that some students are optimistic, and we encourage everyone to be optimistic, right? We want students to be positive. We want you to reach for your goals. And we are, one of the, things we really enjoy doing is helping students to do that. So we don't like to dead end our students. If we feel that you are not competitive, let's say for a US allopathic medical school, we will tell you why, and we will tell you what you need to do to become competitive, right? So, there are always options, and it's really up to you whether or not you decide to pursue those options in order to become competitive, for whatever your ultimate goal is in terms of, where you want to go to school, what you want to do in your future. And we're here to help that. But we sometimes find that, there are students who have unrealistic expectations. They think that by having amazing extracurricular activities, scholarly activities, community service activities, that somehow will trump low metrics meaning, both an MCAT and a GPA. And unfortunately, that rarely happens, right? And that is because applications are screened based on metrics. So medical schools will not often disclose what those metrics are and what those screening points are. But I think if we look at the averages nationally for medical school matriculants, we can sort of get an idea of what you might need to be a competitive medical school applicant. And of course, there are many things that go into determining how competitive you are. And that includes your state residency, your demographics, your ethnic background. These things will put you potentially in a different cohort. Being from, an underserved group, all of those things, might impact how we advise students. But generally speaking, how competitive you are is going to be based on fundamentals, right? And then assuming you make it past those sort of screening numbers, that you meet those benchmarks, then medical school admissions committees will actually look at your application, and that's when the process becomes more nuanced and more based on your achievements, your letters of recommendation, your coursework and everything that you've done to get to this point in your life. So in reviewing the average data for medical school matriculants, and a matriculant is somebody who actually starts in medical school. So in this most recent year, 2020 to 2021, the average MCAT for medical school matriculants was 511.5, right? So what this means is that if you have below a 511.5, you are below the average, right? So, if you have a 510, does that mean you can't get into medical school? No. But if you have a 510, it means that you really need to have a strong GPA. And it means that you need to have really strong scholarly and extracurricular experiences. If you have, let's say, a 506 or 507 or 508 even, it means it's going to be really tough to get into a U.S. allopathic school unless there are, again, other extenuating circumstances. And we can go into that in more detail. So, we definitely think that it's important when entering this process to be realistic. Now, if you have numbers that are below the averages for U.S. allopathic medical schools, consider osteopathic medical schools. I have worked alongside osteopathic medical schools in all clinical settings in which I've worked. And I can tell you that allopathic physicians and osteopathic physicians work alongside one another. They have very similar opportunities. Osteopathic physicians may not necessarily have as many of the same residency opportunities in terms of specialties, just because the most competitive residency programs and the most competitive residency specialties will traditionally consider allopathic medical school students over osteopathic medical school students. But it doesn't mean you can't achieve your goals. Now, in the past, it was a 510 was really considered the benchmark of what you needed to be competitive. And this is because historically, specifically in 2017, 2018, the average MCAT for medical school matriculants was a 510.4. Okay, so in the past 2 years, because the average was the same last year, that average has gone up by 1.1 points. All right. And part of that is just probably because the test prep materials have improved, because the test has been around longer, right? So, the MCAT was revamped in 2015. So the scores have kind of slowly creeped up. I anticipate that the averages are not going to go much far above 511.5, but we will see. And obviously I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know that for certain, but that's just kind of what I anticipate. So, number one is it's just really important to be realistic. So I just sort of want to put that message out there tonight, because we hate for students to be disappointed and to think, oh, I can get into a U.S. allopathic school because I have a 509 and everything's so amazing about me. And that may be true, but it's possible that 509 could keep you out, right? And then we would, try to advise you in terms of, well, okay, what can we do to help you bump that score? What kind of, focused tutoring do you need? Which, we do offer focused tutoring for students. And our students have done very well on the MCAT, with our tutoring as well. So, but, if you have those numbers, then we then look to your activities and what can we do to, sort of present those activities in the best light, so that medical school admissions officers are really intrigued by what you've done. Okay, so that's enough. It's great to see you all. I see we have people here from the Northeast. I hope we have a couple Californians. I realize it's a little bit early, and now it's summer for a lot of people. So probably there are people at the beach and just hanging out and having fun. So I hope that's happening because, as a country, we're opening up and it's been a long year plus, right? So I hope everyone's, enjoying being vaccinated and, being able to, go out to eat and just sort of be maskless and all of that. So it's a new world here. So let me start in and let's answer some questions. And again, please post your questions in the chat. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. So Harriet asks, I was wondering about applying to SMPs. SMPs are special master's programs. Would you know how medical schools look at online master's programs? Okay, Harriet, I don't know of any online special master's programs. So if you know of any of those, please post in the chat because I don't know of any online special master's programs. Special master's programs are programs that are specifically designed for medical school applicants who do not have the undergraduate credentials that they need, meaning a GPA primarily, to be competitive for medical school. So special master's programs are programs where you sometimes might be taking courses alongside first-year medical students, or you may be taking science courses, so BCPM, biochem, physics, math courses that will fall into that category to bump that GPA so that you are more competitive for medical schools. And there are a lot of special master's programs now, so you really need to be careful if you're not going to kind of one of the most established programs in the country. And I'm thinking of like Georgetown, New York Medical College, Loyola. There are some very established special master's programs, and we've worked with students from all of them that have gone on to great medical schools. So those very sort of well-established programs, have great reputations and great track records of getting students into medical schools. Now, if you're looking at special master's programs that, let's say, haven't been around for as long, you would really want to ask them, can you tell me, how your students have done? Where have they gone to medical school? What percentage of your students actually apply to medical school, and ask them to split it up for you, osteopathic and allopathic, and what percentage of those who apply actually get in, right? So you really want data from those schools if they're willing to give it to you. You want to ask, what those students' average GPAs were from their program to kind of get a sense. I can tell you that special master's programs are definitely competitive. The students who go to them are super focused. They're students who tended to underperform as college students, maybe because they weren't as mature, or maybe they weren't as focused on their future careers. Maybe they were having too much fun. There are a whole bunch of reasons, but I can tell you that the students that we have who do special master's programs are super serious students, and they are really goal focused. So they're quite driven. But Harriet, if you do know of any specific special masters that are online, I'd love to know what those are. Okay, someone else asks, how do admissions committees view online biomedical master's degrees? Also, what would be the best way to fix a downward trend? Okay, this is interesting question. So many people are asking about online master's programs. I'd love it if you would email me what those programs are. And you can email info@mededits.com and, put attention Dr. Friedman, because in the subject, because this is interesting to me. We haven't gotten this many questions about online master's programs. I think now with COVID, I think everyone is kind of becoming a bit more comfortable with online education and with remote education. So I would expect these trends to change. However, I don't know how quickly those trends will change, right? Whenever there is a cultural shift in any type of organization or any type of system, it takes time for that shift to take place. So with regards to an online master's program, specifically a biomedical master's program, I would want to know, where are you earning this degree from? Is it a school that really has a good reputation and they're just shifting to online education, which I expect some of the more elite and well-known universities could start doing this. It'll be, again, interesting to see. If it's a new program, I would be careful, right? Because sometimes, people tend to be more comfortable with things that they know in general. So, if the medical schools have never seen this program or they've never seen this university, it might be something they say, well, like, was that really rigorous, especially if you're trying to contradict a downward trend in your undergraduate grade performance, right? They're going to want to see a high grades earned in something that to them is reputable and is known to them. So I would be a little careful, okay, in terms of, deciding to invest your time and your money to bump your GPA by doing some sort of online program if that's something that is not well known to the medical schools. So if you want to type down below where that program is, specifically which college or university is offering it, that would be helpful to know. I am in the process of finishing my personal statement. How important is it detailing a patient care experience in your personal statement? Good question. And, it isn't, the topics you choose aren't necessarily as important as how you write about the topics. Many students, depending on what their experiences are, might write about a patient encounter in their personal statement. We discourage students from trying to write about something that no one has ever heard about, right? This is professional school. It's not like college admissions, where it seems that the topics that college admissions experts really encourage are really esoteric or really unique, something no one's ever written about before. This is professional school. And so writing about a patient encounter is something that is very common, but that doesn't mean it's a bad topic. However, it's not something that you have to do either. Many pre-medical students have not actually had direct patient contact. And so not every student's going to have the opportunity to write about direct patient contact. Writing about shadowing experiences in your personal statement is something that is becoming, a little bit less we're a little bit less in favor of that, just because sort of passive activities now are not viewed as favorably as hands-on active activities. So, and again, it depends on where you are in the process of your education. If you are applying to medical school at the end of your junior year, having hands-on clinical experience is something that is not going to be so easy to obtain unless you are an undergraduate EMT. This is why many students are, taking years after college to, try to gain some of that more hands-on experience. But I'm taking the long way around of saying you don't have to write about a patient encounter. Do you have to have some type of clinical exposure to medicine, exposure to patient care? Absolutely. This is something, that is, in our opinion, required to be a competitive medical school applicant. That exposure can happen, as part of your research, as part of working as an EMT, as part of working as a phlebotomist, but certainly, volunteering in a free clinic. That can happen in a lot of different ways, but we certainly consider patient exposure and, not necessarily direct patient contact, but ideally direct patient contact, but that's not always possible. We consider that a prerequisite. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so, sorry, hold on. I skipped down a bunch. I apologize, I scrolled too far. Okay, I am in the process of finishing my okay, I got it. Okay, thoughts on applying to UCSF without the majority of your science coursework done. I am a JHU post-bac pre-med program and would like to apply this cycle. I have strong ECs, research, and clinical experiences. I don't know how you could apply to medical school if you don't have the majority of your prerequisites completed, because you also need those prerequisites. I realize UCSF with regards to the MCAT is, not requiring the MCAT this cycle. I get it. I would think, Ryan, if you're just planning on applying to one medical school and you're aiming for UCSF, that might be the only school you would be able to apply to. But honestly, I would be hesitant to say that UCSF would favor no MCAT and no prerequisites. So I would say that that would probably be a thumbs down for me. Unless for some reason you have very high level science coursework in other disciplines, then maybe if you have sort of shown, competency in those scientific disciplines by taking higher level classes, that's possible. But I don't know that that would be viewed very favorably. I have to, Spencer, if you can email me, I have to look up the specific data just to see what's updated for the average MCAT for DO schools. And we can post that once we look that up. I believe it's somewhere around a 504 to a 506. But I would have to look that up just because I don't want to give you misinformation. And I did not pull that data. I always like to pull up the most recent data before, I tell everyone what it is. And I just want to make sure that we're not giving you any misinformation. Okay, are there any allopathic schools that reward reinvention and high DIY postbac stats, or DO? All allopathic schools will consider a do-it-yourself postbac program. So we have students who definitely get into very high-level schools, both MD and DO, who have done DIY postbacs. Doing a DIY postbac actually shows a lot of grit and initiative and a lot of other amazing qualities that medical school admissions committees are seeking, because it shows that you're a self-starter and that you can do things on your own, right? So doing a formal postbac program is sort of the easier path, even though it's the more expensive path, right? Doing your own postbac program, and that means taking classes at a four-year university on your own and sort of piecing it together on your own and doing that successfully, as well as taking the MCAT, is actually, in my opinion, pretty impressive. And most people who do that are also working at the same time. They're taking those classes at night. So that shows you're a real do-it-yourselfer, and that's actually a big bonus. It doesn't mean you're looked down upon, however, if you go to a formal program. So both of these options are certainly respected by medical schools, both MD and DO, definitely. My very first school was closed down and it was a private school. Can I put it in the disadvantage essay? Since it took me an additional 1.5 years to finish my degree, how do I go about my credit? Albert, I would recommend that you call MCAS with regards to the credit. A disadvantage status is something that is self-determined. So you need to look at the definition for, what would allow you to declare disadvantaged status, and then decide if you fit into that category. Okay, so I wouldn't say that by just due to the fact that your private school was closed down, I assume that it's your college, your undergraduate college, I wouldn't assume that that puts you in a disadvantaged status, that fact alone. But look at that definition from AMCAS and see if you can answer yes to that question, that you qualify. How do admissions committees look at postbac just aim for disadvantaged students? Example, UC postbac consortium. Again, all postbac programs are going to be looked at the same way, right? So, and disadvantaged students are put in their own cohort when being reviewed by medical school admissions committees. So you're going to be looked at with other disadvantaged students, and and your background will be looked at that way. So it isn't so much where you do the postbac, it's how you do in that postbac, I think, is sort of what we're kind of the overall theme here. Okay, so Harriet, I'm applying to one of the Case Western Masters, which gives the option to choose taking the courses online or in person. Oh, that's really interesting. The website says this program also has a conditional guaranteed interview. That's great. I mean, so yeah, so if this is at a reputable school like Case Western, and they are offering you the option for either in person or online, no one is going to discredit you or, think you took the easy route by doing a course online. I think online education is something that is, going to, again, become more prevalent. And this Case Western example is a perfect one to illustrate that. So this is certainly something that, would be looked upon favorably by medical school admissions committees. And no one's going to say, well, why didn't she do it in person? I think that because online education is first of all, much more doable than it was a few years ago. And with COVID, you know, I just think from a cultural perspective, we've all become very comfortable with this. And everyone understands that, number one, it's easier. And number two, it saves you a ton of money. That, you know, oftentimes, depending on, you know, kind of what your living situation is, that I think everyone is, you know, will consider these online, or I like to call them remote options, you know, very viable and very respectable. So that's really terrific. And Harriet, if you could send us the link to that program, again, at info@mededits.com, and attention Jessica Friedman, I would love to see what that program is. I think that's really innovative. And, you know, and I like to see these trends actually continue. I think that's great. I think it gives people more access to education. Which BSMD programs are you familiar with? I'm familiar with just about all of them. The thing with BSMD programs that you need to be aware of, you know, kind of just looking at things very broadly, BSMD programs are combined programs where you earn both your undergraduate degree and your medical degree in a combined program. Sometimes both those degrees are going to be at the same institution. Sometimes those programs, the undergraduate degree will be at one institution and the MD will be at another institution, and you're guaranteed admission if you maintain a GPA. Some require the MCAT, and you have to earn a certain minimum MCAT for guaranteed admission to the medical school. Or you don't have to take the MCAT potentially. So, you know, the thing with BSMD programs is that a lot of them are not affiliated with prestigious undergraduate colleges. And so, you know, for most students who are applying to BSMD programs, they're super high achievers who are competitive for very elite colleges. So sometimes by going to a BSMD program, you're kind of opting to go to a less rigorous, less prestigious undergraduate institution in order to kind of guarantee that, you know, you've gotten into medical school. But some of these programs are 6 years or 7 years, and, you know, that saves you a full year of tuition, which is huge. You know, I can also tell you, you know, for example, you know, there was something going on at North State in California where the students there were accepted to a BSMD program, and there's something going on where the medical school is now not guaranteeing that all the students will actually get spots in the medical school. So, you know, and now they are sort of at this very unselective undergraduate institution, and they're sort of faced with this issue of, do I transfer to get into a more competitive undergraduate college? So you really, you know, that's an exceptional sort of situation, but it just, you know, kind of illustrates the point that a lot of these programs are not affiliated with top tier institutions. And when we work with BSMD students, they're often faced with this situation of, do I go to the more prestigious undergraduate college and forego the BSMD route because I want to go to, you know, a more, you know, rigorous and, you know, well-reputed undergraduate college. So that's something you really need to ask yourself. What's most important to you? Is it true? Sorry, I scrolled a little too much. Is it true that you need to finish all of your prerequisites for DO schools before you apply, or can you finish the prerequisites up until matriculation? I have not heard that you have to do all the prereqs before you apply. We always have students, for example, you know, who are doing, you know, prerequisites, not necessarily, you know, the basics like biology, chemistry, physics, like the things that you need for the MCAT, you know, but we sometimes have students who are, you know, fulfilling requirements, you know, during their senior year while they're applying, if you're applying as a junior. So, you know, if you have some documentation of that, you know, again, you know, post it in the chat or email us, just because I would like to see that information. Do admissions committees look at the breakdown to the MCAT score in different sections? Absolutely, Mark, they do. And, you know, this is why if you have a very low score in a certain section of your MCAT, that is certainly something that, you know, can work against you. So kind of going back to the data that I had referenced before, if we look at the most recent data, you know, for example, the CARS average was 127, BBLS was 128.1, PSBB was 128.8, and CPBS was 127.8. So, you know, if you have a very low score that's significantly, so I'd say like, you know, 2 to 3 points below these averages, you know, that could be concerning. And it also depends on where that low score is. So the most forgivable low score is going to be in the CAR section, and the least forgivable low scores are going to be in your science sections. Okay. As a first-year pre-med student, what are some things I should focus on in order to better my chances of admission into medical school, i.e. internship volunteering? Okay, Tania, this is a terrific question. The first thing is get your bearings, okay? If you're starting college in the fall, I assume if you're a first-year student, you wanna make sure that you're positioned to do as well academically as you can do, okay? So, because academics are the #1 most important thing when getting into medical school for all the reasons that we've been talking about tonight. So you want to, I would say, first, just, maybe get involved in a couple of clubs or a couple of activities, volunteering, maybe, becoming an EMT, working in a free clinic, volunteering in a free clinic, maybe joining a club or two on campus that interests you. But really the majority of your energy wants to be focused on getting adjusted to college. So, figuring out what your study plan is going to be, figuring out how to balance your time, figuring out how to balance both your social life and your studies, right? So all of these things do take time to kind of figure out as an undergraduate student. And it's also why a lot of students don't do well their freshman year of college, because there is an adjustment period for a lot of students. So, and then, once you do get adjusted to college, that's when you really want to dive in. And I don't like to encourage students, you should do X, Y, and Z. It's about figuring out where your interests are, right? Figuring out what your niche is going to be. And then you try to apply that niche to all of your experiences potentially. So you apply that niche to your, volunteering, to your research. We encourage research over internships, so to speak. So internships are not as common, in medical school admissions as they might be for, other types of graduate schools, like certainly like business school and things of that nature. I haven't submitted the primary yet. If I submit in the next 2 weeks, would it be a disadvantage for medical schools I'm applying for? No. Within the next 2 weeks, you're still in June, right? So 2 weeks from today would be June 24th. That's still great. So you submit the end of June. As soon as you submit, you start being on the lookout for secondary application prompts, because those are going to start to be released the end of June. So I say that as soon as you submit, rather than working off of last year's prompts, you wait for the next year's prompts to come out, although most prompts do not change from year to year. And then you immediately start working on your secondary applications and essays. That way, when you get those secondary essay or those secondary applications with those essay prompts, you're just ready to submit right off the bat. So that's a great way to resolve that problem. Submitting any time in the month of June is an early application, okay? Okay, we only have time for a couple more questions. How might medical school admissions react towards a student who is applying for an MD after completing a PhD with not so high undergraduate metrics? Jonathan, your most recent academic experience is going to be the one that is going to be looked at the most carefully by medical school admissions committee. So by doing a PhD, especially if it's in a scientific discipline, or I'd say only if it's really in a scientific discipline, although you would be doing some math and statistics and things of that nature, regardless of what PhD you're doing, that's essentially like, a super duper SMP, special master's program. So you're really proving yourself in that way. I apologize, my dog and she's barking at something. So please forgive me. I usually put her away, but I forgot. So anyway, so doing a PhD would be a great way to prove yourself academically, assuming that you had a less than perfect undergraduate performance. And that also kind of gives you the time to mature and everything like that. Should I be worried if I got a B in Calc 1 and also Gen Chem 2, I had an A in Gen Chem 1? As long as you have made up for those poor performances, I don't want to say poor, those are good performances, especially depending on where you went to college. If you went to a college where there's grade deflation, and if the entry level classes are super duper competitive, as long as you have an upward trend and the B's aren't a trend. So you have upper level science classes where you have A's and you don't have B's. We would not be too worried about 2 B's on your transcript, even in prerequisites, and also especially if your MCAT sort of disproves those B's. So assuming that your MCAT is higher than that, it's sort of more of an A range MCAT, so to speak, versus a B range MCAT. We would be completely fine with that. That wouldn't be a deal breaker. Okay, so this is all we have time for tonight, but I thank you so much for tuning in. And next week, I will not be holding office hours, so I apologize for that, but I will be back the week following that. So our next office hours will be 2 weeks from today. I encourage you to visit our website, www.mededits.com, sign up and receive our free downloads, and sign up for a free 15-minute consultation if you are interested. And thank you so much for tuning in. Good luck to everybody in the medical school admissions process and the residency admissions process, college, whatever is sort of, next for you. We wish you the best and enjoy the summer, enjoy, kind of the country opening up again. And I hope to see you in 2 weeks.